Can I have a ride to the hospital to see my dad? That was the trembling plea the poor girl whispered on freezing Eastwood Avenue, clutching her soaked jacket with numb fingers, completely unaware that the quiet man she begged was a CEO billionaire, whose reaction would leave her and everyone watching absolutely speechless. She was just a poor girl desperate for a chance to reach her father's hospital bed before it was too late. But the stranger she stopped that night, in the storm, carried a power, a presence, and a hidden life far greater than anything she could have imagined. She stood small, shivering, broken by years of poverty, while he stood tall, calm, and unreadable, the kind of man the world normally bowed to. Yet in that moment, their worlds collided, her desperation against his controlled silence creating a tension heavy enough to bend the air around them. If she had known he was a CEO billionaire, she would have never opened her mouth. But why did he pause for her? Why did his eyes soften the moment she spoke? And what was it about that simple request, a ride to the hospital, that shook him in a way no one else ever had? Rain moved across Eastwood Avenue like it had vengeance in its veins, slamming sideways against buildings and soaking anyone unlucky enough to be outside. And tonight, that unlucky soul was Lena Hart, walking alone, shivering so hard her teeth clattered. Her thin backpack clung to her spine, drenched through, her sneakers squished with every step, growing heavier by the minute. Cars sped by without slowing, tires hissing in the storm, their headlights flashing across her like quick, indifferent glances. She kept her head down, though every step felt like it scraped another layer off her spirit. Crowds rushed past her umbrellas, knocking her shoulders, strangers brushing by without seeing her at all, like she was something the rain pushed forward rather than a girl fighting to keep moving. In her hand, crumpled and nearly disintegrating from the rain, was the $100 diploma hold notice. The ink was bleeding, the paper softening. She clutched it harder, terrified it would dissolve completely and take her last chance at graduating with it. Her fingers were stiff with cold, but she still held it like a lifeline. Like if she loosened her grip, the last 4 years of survival would wash down the gutter. Her breath trembled on the air, merging with the storm. She whispered to herself just to stay anchored. Just a little more, Lena. Just a little more. Thunder trembled overhead. The sidewalks of Eastwood Avenue were slick and crowded. Yet Lena had never felt more alone. Every person rushing by had somewhere to go, someone waiting, a life bigger than standing in the rain begging the universe for mercy. She envied them, the ones who didn't realize how lucky they were to have warmth, money for coffee, shoes without holes, a life without a clock counting down like hers. She hugged the notice to her chest. $100. That was all she needed. $100 standing between her and the piece of paper she had starved for, cried for, stayed awake for, fought for. $100 keeping her from walking across the stage next week with her class. $100 she didn't have. The notice had been slid under her dorm door that morning. Bold, cold letters stating her diploma would be held unless she cleared her outstanding fees. She had read it sitting on the cold dorm floor, the world tilting around her. She'd worked every job she could get. She'd stretched meals. She'd skipped meals. She'd scraped by with grit and stubbornness. But today, everything fell apart. Her father had collapsed. The call came from the hospital. If you want to see him, come now. Her professor had whispered, you'll need to settle this by tomorrow. Her bank app had blinked $5.27. Her chest tightened now just remembering it. She walked faster, though the storm shoved back. The avenue's neon signs blurred in the rain, glowing faintly against her wet cheeks. She wiped her face, unsure where the rain stopped and the tears began. She could barely feel her fingers. Her backpack strap kept slipping off her shoulder. She wanted shelter. She wanted warmth. She wanted a break, just one break, but Eastwood Avenue had no mercy for girls like her. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating how small she looked in the relentless night. At the corner, her foot slid in a puddle, and she stumbled, catching herself only because she slammed a hand against a parking meter. The jolt shot pain through her wrist. She closed her eyes, sucking a sharp breath. Please, not today, she whispered. Behind her, laughter spilled from a restaurant doorway. the bright warmth inside reflected in the glass, taunting her. A group stepped out, umbrellas popping open as they hurried into rideshares. One woman complained, loudly, that her shoes were ruined by a drop of water. Lena looked down at hers, soaked, frayed, the soles nearly peeling off. She kept walking. The sidewalk thinned as she reached the long stretch of Eastwood Avenue, where buildings grew taller and the wealthy lived high above the street noise. She didn't belong here. Not in her soaked jacket, not with the shaking notice in her hand, not with her empty bank account or her too thin gloves. But she had no choice. The hospital was across town. She had tried the bus suspended due to flooding. She had tried calling everyone she knew, no one answered. She had walked for miles. Her father's face flashed in her mind, his voice, his laugh. The thought of not making it in time clawed at her chest until it hurt to breathe. The rain grew colder. She slowed near the intersection of Eastwood and Lark, her knees weakening. Cars splashed past. She sniffed hard, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. She looked at the notice again, the ink fading, but the $100 standing out like a cruel reminder. She whispered, "I'll get you the money, Dad. I swear." Her voice broke. That was the moment the despair caught up to her, a physical weight dropping inside her. She felt it. The truth. She couldn't do this alone anymore. Not tonight. Not like this. She blinked up through wet lashes as a sleek black sedan glided toward the intersection, its headlights cutting clean lines through the storm. It slowed. Not much, but enough to make her heart catch. She stared. The car wasn't like the others. It was the kind of vehicle that cost more than her entire college tuition. The kind driven by people who lived in penthouses, not tiny dorm rooms with broken heaters. She shouldn't approach it. She knew she shouldn't. But she also knew she had nothing left. No pride, no backup plan, no time. Her father lay alone in a hospital bed. She swallowed, trembling. The sedan rolled to a gentle stop a few feet from her, and something inside her cracked open. Maybe, just maybe, this stranger could help. She took a shaky breath, rain running into her mouth, her heart pounding like she was about to step off a cliff. She forced herself toward the car, her last humiliating option, her only option. The storm blurred Eastwood Avenue into streaks of light and shadow as Lena stood frozen near the slowing sedan, her breath fogging weakly in the cold. Her fingers tightened around the diploma hold notice until it nearly tore. The world around her pulsed with movement, umbrellas shifting, cars rushing, neon signs flickering. But inside her chest, everything felt slow, heavy, unbearably loud. Her heart pounded against her ribs, each beat echoing 4 years of sacrifice that had brought her to this humiliating moment. 4 years that now felt like they were collapsing under the weight of a single sheet of paper and a hospital call she wished she could unhear. Her wet hair clung to her cheeks as she closed her eyes, and against the roar of the storm, the past slipped in without permission. Night after night, she had scrubbed the floors of Fairline University's science building long after most students had gone home. She remembered the way ammonia clung to her clothes, the way the soles of her cheap sneakers stuck to the linoleum when the wax was fresh. Cleaning wasn't the worst part, it was seeing the discarded coffee cups, sushi boxes, and luxury jackets forgotten in study rooms. Proof that some students had lives untouched by hunger or fear. She had whispered encouragements to herself during those late shifts, telling herself that every swipe of the mop brought her 1 inch closer to graduation. Then came the diner, the graveyard shift where she balanced plates with aching wrists and forced a smile even when her eyelids sagged. She would arrive just past midnight, the bell jingling above the door as sleepy truckers and night owls filled the booths. Her manager always said, "Just stay awake, kid," as if staying awake was the only thing she had to survive. She'd keep her textbooks under the counter, flipping through pages whenever customers were slow, fighting to memorize formulas while frying oil crackled in the background. She had lived on tips most nights, crumpled 1s and 5s left beside half-eaten pancakes, tips that went toward textbooks, rent, bus fare. But lately, even those hadn't been enough. Her mother's hospital bills had wiped out everything she saved. Everything. She remembered sitting by her mother's bed the night before she passed, holding her frail hand as the machines beeped slowly around them. Her mother had whispered, "Finish, Lena. Promise me you'll finish school. Don't let the world take that from you too. Those were her last clear words. The memory cut through her chest even now, sharp as broken glass. She blinked the tears away, but they mixed with the rain until she couldn't tell the difference. After the funeral, she'd sold her grandmother's gold locket, the only jewelry passed down through 3 generations to cover late rent and part of her tuition. She remembered the weight of it in her palm. How familiar it felt. How wrong it felt to let it go. But hunger and homelessness were louder than sentiment. She'd survived on instant noodles and campus food drives. She'd worked 2 shifts back-to-back during finals. She'd fallen asleep once in the bathroom stall between classes, forehead pressed against her backpack. Her professor had found her curled beside the hand dryer and pretended not to notice the exhaustion carved into her face. She never asked for help. Pride, perhaps, or fear that if she leaned on anyone, they might see how close she was to shattering. Yet here she was, on a freezing avenue, about to beg a stranger. The rain drummed harder, blurring the edges of the sidewalk. The black sedan idled, and its headlights glowed warm and steady, like a small island of calm waiting for her. She looked at her reflection in the glossy door, soaked, trembling, nothing like the person she hoped to be on graduation day. She looked like someone life kept beating down, someone life dared to break. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she knew without checking who it was, the hospital. She had already missed 2 calls. Her knees weakened again, threatening to drop her to the pavement. Her father had been her last remaining piece of family. If he left too, she steadied herself with a deep inhale. That moment triggered another memory, her father sitting at their old kitchen table years ago, teaching her math using bottle caps. "Lena," he'd say, tapping the table with his pen, "you think you're small in this world, but you're not. You're a fighter. Don't let life convince you otherwise." She had laughed then, batting the caps away playfully, thinking he was invincible, but invincible fathers collapse too. She exhaled shakily. She stared at the sedan again, this time noticing that despite the storm, its windows were spotless. Its paint untouched by dirt or weather. The car didn't belong here. Not in this rain, not in her world. It screamed wealth, exclusivity, power. Its presence alone made the sidewalk feel different, like she had accidentally stepped into a life she wasn't meant to see. She felt her pride rise, a painful knot in her throat. Begging was something she had always promised herself she'd never do. She'd rather work herself to the bone than ask for charity. But tonight, pride wasn't a luxury she could afford. Cold seeped deeper into her clothes. A horn honked somewhere behind her. A streetlight flickered, and inside her chest, something finally surrendered. Her father needed her. Her future needed her. Her last promise to her mother needed her. So Lena stepped forward. Her legs trembled as she approached the sedan. Each step felt heavier than the last. She could hear the hum of the engine. She could see her own reflection shaking in the tinted glass. Rain rolled down her face in thick lines as she lifted her hand toward the window. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, barely breathing, she knocked soft, desperate, and utterly human. The window began to lower, and her life shifting, breaking, reshaping began with that single, trembling knock. The rain made Eastwood and Lark look like a watercolor painting dissolving in real-time, colors running, lights stretching, sidewalks shimmering under the weight of the storm. Lena stood at the intersection, soaked through to her bones, her breath shaking in uneven bursts. Her clothes clung to her skin, her fingers numb, her legs trembling from hours of walking. She stared down at the diploma hold notice in her hand, the ink bleeding until the words looked like they were crying with her. She felt the breaking point before she accepted it, like a small physical crack somewhere deep in her chest. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, a soft collapse inside her spirit, the moment where strength became too heavy to carry. Her father was lying in a hospital bed alone. Her future hung on a $100 fee she couldn't pay. Her body was shaking from cold and exhaustion. She whispered, barely audible under the violent rain, "I don't know what to do anymore." It was the first time she had said it out loud. The truth, the surrender, the admission that she had run out of miracles, out of energy, out of options. The storm swallowed her words, like it swallowed everything else about her. Her footsteps, her presence, her hope. She closed her eyes, letting the rain hit her face like cold needles. If she had been stronger, she would keep walking. If she had been braver, she would try again tomorrow. But she wasn't strong right now. She wasn't brave. She was tired, soul tired. Her knees softened as she stood there, teetering between forward and collapse. And that was the exact second the sleek black sedan slowed. Its headlights sliced through the storm with sharp, clean beams that cut across her silhouette. The car was silent, controlled, deliberate, the kind of vehicle driven by someone who never hurried because the world adjusted for him. The sedan glided toward the crosswalk as if drawn to her, as if the universe had finally sent something unexpected into her unraveling night. She turned her head slowly, her wet hair whipping across her lips. The car stopped at the curb just a few feet from her. The engine hummed with quiet authority. The back window remained dark. The front window remained tinted. And then, gently, the driver's door opened. He stepped out, not hurried, not curious, not intrusive. He stepped out the way someone steps into a meeting they already control. Tall, composed, tailored suit untouched by the rain despite stepping into it. Dark hair slicked back neatly, sharp jawline. Eyes that didn't search the world, they seemed to read it. The storm didn't hit him the same way it hit her. The rain slid off his coat like it didn't dare leave a mark on him. Everything about him radiated power restrained by calm, wealth wrapped in subtlety, a presence that didn't need to announce itself. He was the kind of man people followed without asking where he was going. Lena swallowed hard. Her heart kicked once, painfully. She took a small step back. Every instinct inside her screamed that this man did not belong in her world. He looked like someone who owned buildings, not someone who stood drenched in the doorway of one. Someone who signed contracts worth millions, not someone who scraped for bus fare. Someone who had choices, resources, privilege, everything she didn't have. She turned her face away, embarrassed by her own soaked clothes, by her trembling hands, by the way her teeth wouldn't stop clattering. Pride flickered in her chest, like a dying candle, small but stubborn. She didn't want him to see her like this. But her father was running out of time. The man looked at her, really looked, his gaze steady, sharp, quiet. It wasn't pity. It wasn't judgment. It was something else. Something she couldn't read. Something deeper. "Are you all right?" His voice was low, controlled, refined. She shook her head once, water dripping from her chin. She tried to step away from him, but her legs nearly slipped on the slick pavement. She caught herself, breath sharp, cheeks burning with humiliation. He stepped forward instinctively, just enough to keep her from falling, but not enough to impose. His restraint was alarming. Men with that presence usually didn't hesitate. Lena forced herself to face him. She drew a shaky breath, and then, with a voice barely holding itself together, she lifted the wrinkled, soaked notice between them. I need a ride to the hospital to see my dad," she whispered, her voice cracking. "And I need $100 to graduate tomorrow. I'm sorry. I know it sounds stupid. I know I shouldn't ask. I don't have anyone else." Tears mixed with the rain, streaking down her face. He glanced at the notice, reading it carefully, the crease between his brows tightening as he absorbed every line. His expression changed, not dramatically, but subtly. A soft recoil, a soft recognition, something emotional stirring beneath his controlled exterior. He lifted his eyes to hers. "Why me?" he asked softly. Lena's breath hitched. "Because you stopped," she whispered. "And, I don't know, you looked like you'd listen." Something shifted in his gaze, a flicker of intensity, like her answer had hit deeper than she knew. He exhaled slowly, and then without a word he bent down. She blinked, confused. He slipped off his polished black shoes. Then he straightened, barefoot in the rain. "Wear these," he said, holding them out to her. "We'll talk tomorrow." Thunder cracked above them. Before she could speak, before she could question, before she could understand, he returned to the sedan barefoot, rain hitting his shoulders. The car pulled away, and Lena stood stunned, shivering, holding the expensive shoes against her chest like a symbol she couldn't interpret, a question she couldn't answer, and a new beginning she had never expected. Morning light crept through Lena's thin dorm curtains like it was afraid to enter. She blinked awake slowly, her body heavy from the night storm, her muscles stiff from walking miles in wet clothes. For a moment she didn't know where she was, her dorm ceiling blurred above her, faint sunlight soft against the peeling paint. Her ears still rang with echoes of rain. Then her eyes drifted to the foot of her bed, and there they were, his shoes, sitting exactly where she had placed them the night before, perfectly still on the worn rug, impossibly clean despite the storm. For a moment the memory felt unreal, the sedan, the man, his presence, his voice, his barefoot exit. She sat up slowly, rubbing both hands through her tangled hair, trying to steady her breath. She looked around the room, as if expecting him to be there, watching silently from the corner. But it was only her cramped dorm, her scattered textbooks, her damp jacket hanging off a chair. Yet the shoes remained, undeniable proof that last night wasn't the fever dream her exhaustion wanted her to believe. She pulled her knees into her chest, staring at them. Why had he done it? Why hadn't he simply handed her the money? Why give her shoes that probably cost more than her tuition? Why tell her they would talk tomorrow? Who was he really? Every question felt too heavy to unravel. Her phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. He's stable. Come when you can. Relief washed through her so suddenly. Her eyes stung. She whispered, "Thank you." To no one in particular, the ceiling, the universe, maybe even the stranger with the shoes. But as she got dressed, she kept glancing at the shoes, as if they were watching her decision. She hesitated. She shouldn't wear something this expensive. She shouldn't even touch it again. It felt wrong. It felt too intimate, too symbolic, too connected to a man whose name she still didn't know. Yet somehow, deep inside, she felt he meant for her too. With trembling hands, she slipped off her thin socks and slowly slid her feet into the shoes. They fit. Not perfectly, but close enough to send a small, inexplicable shiver up her spine. "I'll return them to him," she whispered to the empty room, gripping her diploma gown. "I'll find him after the ceremony. I'll give them back. I'll thank him properly." She didn't believe the words fully. Not yet. But she clung to them anyway. The bus ride to campus was crowded with excited students in crisp gowns and polished hair, their joy swelling through the aisles. Lena sat quietly near the window, her damp curls tied back, the borrowed shoes tucked neatly beneath her seat. She clasped the diploma hold release slip the registrar had given her that morning, after she paid the remaining fee with unexpected financial aid approval. Approval she had applied for months ago, and assumed had been denied. As the bus rattled down the streets, she kept touching the shoes with the tips of her toes, grounding herself. She felt out of place among the other graduates, girls with expensive perfume, boys with tailored suits under their gowns. They laughed, took selfies, talked about job offers waiting for them. Meanwhile, she held a backpack with safety pins for zippers. But she wasn't ashamed. Not today. Her father was alive. Her diploma was guaranteed. Her future, blurry, uncertain, fragile, was real. At the campus quad, she stepped off the bus and inhaled the cold morning air. Students swarmed like a river of blue gowns, and she felt momentarily swept by the energy. She clutched her gown tighter, adjusting the cap on her head as her feet carried her across the lawn. "Lina," a voice called. She turned to see Professor Delaney, a kind older woman with silver hair pulled back and framed glasses slipping down her nose. She hurried over, her arms opening wide. "There you are," the professor said warmly, squeezing Lena's shoulders. "I'm so proud of you. You've worked harder than anyone I've ever taught." Lena exhaled, her eyes softening. Praise was something she rarely received and almost never believed. "You earned this," Delaney continued, her tone firm. "Every step, every sacrifice, every impossible night you survived today is yours." Lena swallowed around the lump, rising in her throat. "Thank you." Before her emotions could spill over, a staff member directed them inside. The graduation hall was glowing with soft light, 1,000 seats filling fast. Families waved from the audience, cameras flashing, Flowers rustling. Lena walked down the aisle with the other graduates, her breath shallow, her heart fluttering with nerves and hope. She sat in the middle row, hands folded in her lap. Then something strange pulled her attention. A quiet ripple moved through the audience. Her pulse slowed. There, seated among distinguished guests, wearing the same composed expression he wore last night in the rain, was the man, the CEO Billionaire. She had begged for a ride. He sat upright in a black suit, no sunglasses, no distraction, no entourage, just calm, unwavering attention. His gaze drifted over the hall, then met hers like he had been waiting for her eyes. She froze. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a nod that carried weight, intention, promise. Air left her lungs in a slow, trembling rush. Why was he here? How did he find the ceremony? What did he want? Why did she matter to someone like him? But the most unsettling question, the one her soul whispered even before she understood it, was, what was he planning to reveal after the ceremony? Her hands tightened around the edges of her gown, and as the dean began calling names, Lena realized something terrifyingly beautiful. The shoes on her feet were not the beginning of a kindness. They were the beginning of a truth that would change everything.